Family Pictures.
The year is 1892. It's a cold winter night. Beside a lake sits a small cottage with warm light coming from inside. Behind the closed doors, a small innocent girl, Melody, no older than 6, is surrounded by a group of people who are rocking back and forth, chanting. Their faces concealed by black cloaks. A basin of steaming blood is brought forward. One by one, the cloaks are removed, revealing women with black eyeballs. Some kind of ritual is about to be performed, but outside a small group is quietly forming. Led by a priest, Father Picard, this band of sectaries are here to stop this evil. The witches quickly become aware of the mob outside and rush to finish their ritual. A ritual in which they ask their master, Satan, to share with Melody one of his great powers, the power to read the thoughts of men. But before they can finish, the witches are dragged out of the cottage and tied to stakes. Melody is brought out, crying for her mother. Father Picard shows no mercy and orders that the child be burned with the others. Hidden in the nearby woods, someone watches. One of the witches has escaped. The instant fire is brought to Melody's stake, her eyes turn black, and she curses the Puritans in a demonic voice as she goes up in flames.
Present day.
With their 5-year-old daughter Tammy, an African-American couple, Doug, very handsome, and Amanda, a light-skinned beauty, have just closed on their dream home, due in no small part to Doug's recent promotion. Doug, an engineer, is now vice president of a technological firm. Their new home is a stately 8-bedroom mansion that is settled in the country next to a picturesque lake, complete with a boathouse and a narrow wooden dock. On the very first night, Doug is about to fall asleep when he senses a presence in the room. Startled, he sits up and looks around to find nothing. No one. The next morning, Doug is distracted by the task of helping Amanda hire the family housekeeper. They decide on Miss Stevens, a motherly woman from Jamaica. With the help of Darla, his sister, and only other living family member, Doug and family start to get things situated in their home. Darla is married with 2 children, and their 2 families are extremely close. Doug and Darla are surprised to see the large picture of Amanda's deceased mother hanging in the hallway. The resemblance is eerie. To clear out the main residence, the boathouse is used for storage. Working late one night, Doug discovers an insignia engraved into the wall but pays it little attention. Miss Stevens quickly becomes part of the family as they find a routine, Doug establishing himself in his new position, Amanda seeing her patients in her dermatology practice, and Tammy in kindergarten. Cleaning Doug's office one day, Miss Stevens hums as she dusts the large portraits of the smiling family hanging on the walls. She's about to exit when she sees a large spot of dust that she missed on the bureau. A little aggravated, Miss Stevens re-enters the room, only to let out a gasp when she sees that all the portraits she had just dusted are now hanging upside down. Troubled, she does not mention this incident to Doug or Amanda. One Sunday morning a few weeks later, as the couple is getting ready for church, Doug looks out the bedroom window and he sees an old woman, dressed in black, trimming his bushes. She turns to face him but is faceless. Instantly uncomfortable, Doug rushes outside and around the house to find no one. The hedges are freshly cut, but the branches on the ground are completely dried out. That same night, Doug's sanity is severely tested. Working in the boathouse, he discovers that the strange insignia that had once been carved into one of the walls has been erased by someone or something. While he's still grasping with the bizarre occurrence, he comes face to face with an apparition resembling one of the burnt witches from the beginning of our story. Scared, he drops a box on his ankle and scrambles for safety, only to realize that he's alone. Tormented, he visits the pastor of his church, Reverend Jackson. Hoping that the Reverend might have some settling answers, Doug tells the clergyman about the series of events that led him to the church that day. The Reverend listens carefully and has encouraging words for his parishioner. When the pastor offers to visit Doug's house, in order to say a word of prayer to bless the new house and the household, Doug is greatly relieved. When Amanda hears about the visit, she's highly upset at having guests before they are comfortably settled in. Reverend Jackson visits several days later and is about to start the benediction when howling screams from the kitchen bring the entire family running to find Miss Stevens on the floor, a victim of an apparent pressure cooker accident. It takes only a few days before the absence of Miss Stevens puts a strain on the household. Sensing that his wife needs help, Doug suggests that Amanda make one of her special herbal teas and go to bed, leaving him to bathe and tuck Tammy in. Amanda gratefully agrees and leaves her husband to finish the house chores. That same night, Reverend Jackson soaks in a hot bath after a hard day. With his eyes barely open, he notices some movement and sits up in the tub, spilling water on the floor. In his bathroom stands a dark figure, its face hidden by a black cloak. Reverend Jackson opens his mouth to scream, but no sound can escape as his mouth begins to disappear. The dark figure waves an arm, and the temperature of the water starts to rise. Reverend Jackson struggles against an invisible force, holding his body in the scalding water. He thrashes violently, but seconds later, his lifeless body sinks into the boiling water. Doug is completely floored when he finds out that Reverend Jackson died under suspicious circumstances. The closed coffin service is disturbing for all the church members, but it shakes Doug to his core. He looks around the church at the other mourners and notices a white man who seems out of place at this black family funeral. Doug dismisses the odd mourner as he is overcome with the overwhelming feeling that something evil is happening and that he is caught in the middle. Grappling for answers, Doug visits Miss Stevens, who had refused to come back to work. Miss Stevens informs Doug of her suspicion that her accident was not a mishap at all. She shares with him her awareness of a dark energy engulfing his new home. Her advice is to get protection for himself and his family. Following Miss Stevens' advice, Doug goes to meet a voodoo priestess in the worst part of town and finds that she has an uncanny insight into his personal life. She warns him that his days are numbered, but more importantly, it is his daughter Tammy that they want. Doug is severely disturbed, but is grateful for the voodoo elements of empowerment and protection that she sells him. The seasons change, and those troubling incidents almost become a distant memory for Doug as he hosts his annual 4th of July barbecue. The guests celebrate late into the evening, and as planned, Darla's children, Tina and Othello, spend the night. Doug waves goodbye as Darla and her husband drive away, but suddenly feels a cold chill up his spine when he sees 3 silhouettes in the vehicle. Doug immediately calls Darla on her cell phone and is reassured that everything is fine. Doug is sleepless hours later when a police cruiser turns onto his property. Doug opens the front door to 2 police officers with devastating news. His sister and her husband were killed in a car accident. At Darla's funeral, Doug is too devastated to notice the same out-of-place white man from the Reverend services and barely has time to mourn his sister's death when the family of the brother-in-law asks him and Amanda to take custody of the children. Doug can only find closure by conducting his own investigation. His college roommate, who is now an assistant district attorney, helps Doug secure the official reports of his sister's accident and autopsy. His investigation quickly reveals unsettling information that suggests mysterious and inexplicable foul play. Doug takes his findings to the police, but the officers are not open to Doug's theories, except for one out-of-the-way cop. A sloppy older man, in great need of a shave, the out-of-place mourner at both Reverend Jackson and Darla's funeral, Detective Hank Mashkov, whose career consists of investigating the unexplained deaths in the county. Detective Mashkov gives Doug a brief history of paranormal cases in the county dating back to when Mashkov's grandfather was on the force. Mashkov quickly realizes that Doug has close ties to several of the latest victims and agrees that evil forces are at play in and around Doug's life. This new information fuels Doug even further as he dives deeper into discovering the darkness that threatens his family. Once a dedicated executive, Doug now spends his days in the public library researching cults and connections that would explain why his family is being haunted. He finds the same insignia that was in his boathouse and identifies a sect that call themselves the Sorcerers of the 13th Order. They believe that the devil would share the power that enables him to read the thoughts of men with a female child, bathed in the virgin blood of Kim, only on her 6th birthday, and only on the sacred land of the cult. Furthering his research, Doug comes across a book with a 19th century picture of a group of white women standing in front of a small cottage. There's a lake in the background. We recognize them as witches from the beginning of the story. Doug is mesmerized by the photo and is especially drawn to a spot behind the woman that is out of focus. Doug takes the picture to a photo shop to get the picture enhanced, sharing all this information with his newfound friend, Detective Mashkov. Even on Tammy's 6th birthday, Doug is too preoccupied to get excited with her. He hurries to pick up the pictures and uncovers something that shocks him. He immediately calls Detective Mashkov and tells the civil servant to meet him at his house. Doug speeds home. The newly enhanced images are the key to it all. When he arrives, he can sense that something is wrong. There are no signs of Amanda and Tammy, but he soon finds Tina and Othello with their throats sliced. The amount of blood is unnerving. Overcome with grief, he can barely hold it all together, but sees the murder weapon next to the lifeless bodies of his niece and nephew. He picks up the knife and stands over the dead boy and girl. With the knife in hand and new resolve in his eyes, he continues to search for his wife and daughter but finds the entire house empty. The boathouse is the only place left to look. Doug makes his way into the boathouse and finds his wife and daughter covered with blood, cowering in a corner. They are relieved to see him, but Doug is dealing with other emotions. He hugs Tammy tightly, but she steps back just in time to avoid a fatal thrust of the knife. Amanda is shocked and shields her daughter, wondering what is wrong with her husband. Tears stream down Doug's face as he moves against his family. With the blade in hand, he moves to give the final blow when Detective Mashkov appears and instructs him to put the weapon down.
Put it down! Doug,
the family
what are you
turns
doing?
to see the detective service weapon trained on Doug. Doug realizes his situation and with one last act of resolve, he lunges towards his wife and daughter. Service and emergency vehicles fill the driveway. 3 body bags are carried into the medical examiner's van. Mashkov looks on with a sick feeling in the pit of his stomach. He leans against Doug's car and notices the enhanced pictures in the passenger seat. He reaches into the car and picks up a few of the pictures, the headshots of each individual witch. He looks through them until he comes to one that brings a look of horror to his face. Among the enhanced pictures of each of the white witches is a photo of the spot in the original picture that had been out of focus but now enhanced. It reveals
Family Pictures.